In today's episode with guest Brian Kurtz, we talk lessons from running Boardroom, the most successful direct response company of its era, what he learned from Marty Edelson and Gene Schwartz, and what makes breakthrough advertising the most important marketing book ever written. My name is Henry Bingaman. This is Getting Out of the Machine. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. This is a very special episode with my guest, Brian Kurtz. Brian was at the head of the legendary direct response company Boardroom for many years. He got it to a peak of $150 million before retiring from that phase of his life. He's also the author of the book Over Deliver, which I have right here. And now he runs the Titans Mastermind and the Titans Accelerator, which I'm a member of. So, Brian, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. And thanks for being part of Accelerator. You've added a lot to the group just by joining with your experience and background. And when, it was a no-brainer, it wasn't a quid pro quo and it wasn't, conditional. But when you said you were going to join and then said, can I ask you to be on my podcast? I would have been on your podcast whether you joined or not, because anything that you're doing is worth being involved in based on my experience and interactions with you. I know your work at Agora was fantastic, and working with the copywriting community in the coaching area, which I'm not a copywriting coach because I'm not a copywriter. Although I play one in a blog every once in a while, but I don't see myself as a copywriter writing soup to nuts promotion. And you've done a lot of great work. So it was actually, you had me at hello, Brian, when you said, will you be on my podcast? So
yeah, really you had agreed to do the podcast before I even thought about joining Accelerator. I didn't even know about it until we had that discussion. So I'm happy to be a member of the group. And, I've known of you since I first started copywriting. So that's 2008. And you were at the head of this legendary company, Boardroom. And, every copywriter in that era had Boardroom as their target client, because if you could work for Boardroom, you were one of the best of the best, and you'd never really struggle for work again. Can you kind of talk about how you got into Boardroom, how you got started there, and what made it such a special place?
Yeah, I mean, how I got in is sort of by accident, but I was an English major in college, which means I didn't have a job when I got out. So I just walked the streets of Manhattan looking for a job. I went to every publishing company because I figured English was words and language. So why not publishing? That was the logic. 4 years of college got me there.
That makes sense.
It makes sense, right? I know how to read and write.
Worth the tuition, sure.
Exactly. So I just went to I mapped out my map every day. I went to the library. There were libraries were used as libraries back then. This is 1981. And I would just map out my day, and I'd go to 20 or 30 companies and drop off a resume and this and that. And I ended up getting a job at this play publisher, actually the largest play publisher in the world at the time, Samuel French, Inc. And so I was working there in amateur leasing, and some headhunter who met me, he took a shining to me. He liked me. He thought I was ambitious. He was wrong, of course. No, I'm kidding. But he thought I was, he just liked me. And he said, I have this entrepreneur who's started a new company 10 years ago. It's growing, and I think he'd love you. And that was Marty Edelson, who was the founder of Boardroom. And so eventually a job opened up at Boardroom. Any job would have been better than doing Samuel French, because I was making, $9,500 a year, commuting to my parents' house with my commute. The bus fare, took a chunk out of the 9,500 too. So, I went for an interview there, and the job was in list management, in-house list management. What is list house? I didn't even know what it was. I mean, I knew that they published newsletters and books, didn't know much about the company, but it was all about that this headhunter had an inkling that I would hit it off with Marty. I mean, talk about, it's sort of like a metaphor for my whole career. When you talk about, and this as a copywriter, writing lists, writing messaging to lists, And so, my messaging would be perfect for the list called Marty Edelson. And it was kind of I thought about that years later, and everything what goes around comes around. So anyway, I got this job in list management. Most lists, this was all direct mail, by the way. There was no internet. There's no email lists. It's all direct mail and direct mail lists. And the interesting thing was that, most companies had their lists managed by an outside company. If you're Money Magazine or you're, Consumer Reports or some company with a list in direct mail, there's a list manager that manages a lot of different lists. Boardroom happened to manage their list in-house. That was a little bit in terms of the control, because Boardroom published newsletters, not magazines. So there was no advertising. Newsletters meant no advertising. You had to make money in circulation. But not only did you make money in circulation, you made money renting the list. And the list was powerful. It was a list of executives, both at home and business, who bought through the mail, just a great list. So they wanted to keep it under wraps in terms of managing it in-house. And it ended up being like a $5 million profit center once I got a hold of it. But it was a great place to start in direct response marketing, because it was all about the audience. It was all about the list. And so I started realizing the connection between the list and the promotion that got the name on the list, which is so logical, but it's not something that people back then sold lists like. Lists were sold with these data cards where you had the number of names on a list, how much it costs, and they would like give out the data cards to the list brokers to go, recommend to their clients. But at Boardroom, I went in as a list manager and said, you know what? Look at the mailing pieces that we use from the best copywriters in the world. I'm talking about Gene Schwartz. I'm talking about Mel Martin. I'm talking about Jim Rutz, Gary Bencivenga, like the best of the best back then. This is in the 80s. And I'm showing them that this is the type of package we use. It attracts mail order junkies onto our list who want to buy more. And they're curious. Mail order junkies is not a derogatory term. It's a great term, and that's how I sold the list. And I realized, looking back, that that's what got me sold on direct response marketing, on copywriting and how copy relates to lists and offers. And so starting from the audience, to me, is always the best place. Of course, that's where I started, so I guess it's the best place for me. But I do think it's the best place for any marketer or copywriter to start from, with the audience and the list. So that was my origin story. As far as like what made Boardroom so special, it was really a lot of the same principles that, marketing was not just, throwing stuff up against the wall. I mean, we were all direct mail when I started, and, you can't just throw, a million-piece direct mail campaign out there with postage and printing that you had to pay for and expect, miracles to happen because you're a genius. So the planning, in fact, my book Over Deliver, chapter 3 is how paying postage made me a better marketer. So I'm not saying everybody should be doing direct mail all the time, even today, but why it made me a better marketer was the discipline that direct mail took. It was, and I think the discipline in the entire company, not just with me, but the whole company was disciplined in terms of putting out the best products, the best promotion to go with those products, with the best people to write the packages for them, the best editors and sources to do the content. So it was kind of like a perfect storm of excellence. And if I have to, I'm being kind of broad with that, but it really was true. I mean, it really was just I don't want to say it was it was a factory, but not a sweatshop. It was a direct marketing factory, but not a sweatshop. And the disciplines that we learned, both from Marty and the copywriters and the consultants. I mean, we paid for the best consultants and the best copywriters. So, two of my consultants, one of them was Gordon Grossman, who was like the guy who engineered the Reader's Digest sweepstakes stuff in the 1960s. And Dick Benson, who was like the top guy in direct mail in the world. And those guys were like, my buds, I mean, I was their student, of course, but I wanted to be their protege, just like I wanted to be Gene Schwartz's protege and Gary Bencivenga's and Jim Rutz's. So it was the combination of excellence in content, in copy, and everything, and going out to find answers from experts with much more wisdom and much more information that we could corral in-house. And it's a beautiful thing, because Marty was a headstrong, entrepreneur with a big ego, but not big enough to not know what he didn't know, or at least knew he didn't know a lot. And he was so inquisitive and so curious. And I'd say that was a kind of a foundation of Boardroom as well, is that we were the most curious company. We were, and we were trained to be curious. And if you weren't curious, you wouldn't last there. You had to ask the right questions. You had to ask more questions than anyone else. And that's when I came up with the concept, which I think you agree with, which is, the best copywriters are the best interviewers, because they ask the best questions of their clients to get under the skin of the audiences, because the entrepreneur with the big idea is the one that's going to basically, give the information. When Gene Schwartz did the original promotion for Boardroom Reports, which was our first newsletter, I wasn't there. It was 1972, but I know the story, and because I heard it from Gene. So Gene wrote and anybody who's listening who doesn't know who Gene Schwartz is, I'll say shame on you, but you may not. But Gene Schwartz is one of the fathers of copywriting and wrote Breakthrough Advertising, which is one of the most, kind of the pinnacle book of human behavior and not just copywriting. But anyway, Gene wrote the promotion for the original promotion for Boardroom Reports. And it was a headline that said, read 300 business magazines in 30 minutes and get the guts of each. That was the main headline. And that's what Boardroom Reports was. It was a digest of everything in business that you couldn't get on your own, usually from books that you wouldn't read, but getting the nuts and bolts of those books. That was Marty's essence. He always said that you can't read books cover to cover. There's only like, a chapter in each book that's worth it. And he would go find that chapter and then write about it in Boardroom Reports. So Gene writes this incredible package. It launches the company, and everybody's congratulating Gene on, what a great package he wrote. And Gene said, well, you know what? I didn't really write the package. Marty did. And we said, what do you mean? You wrote the package, Gene. He said, no, I spent 2 full days with Marty, just picking his brain, just going deep with him about his mission for this publication, what it was all about, what he was up to in launching this newsletter and this company. And so I just took what he told me and turned it into some kind of poetry or some kind of, direct response, which is important. I mean, Gene had a big ego too, but he was also had a big streak of humility as well, which made him so special. But he was giving Marty credit for the copy almost. And that's the essence of what, going back to your question, which was what made Boardroom so special. It was this integration of lists and copy and offers and questioning everything. And I mean, there's a lot more to it, but I thought that would be a good example to show what made Boardroom tick.
Yeah, no, we're going to talk about breakthrough advertising a lot. That was the reason that we kind of got together. But I want to know, Marty Edelson was such an interesting character, and everybody that knows him speaks very fondly of him. And he was one of your mentors, I believe. So can you kind of pick out 1 or 2 lessons that he taught you that really resonated with you and kind of advanced your career?
God, there are so many. I mean, I've got quotes all over my book and Over Deliver from him. But one thing I learned from him is something that was on the back of his business card. And it's a Zen Buddhist text. I have it on my wall, so I'm going to read it. The master in the art of living makes little distinction between his work and his play, his labor and his leisure, his mind and his body, his education and his recreation, his love and his religion. He hardly knows which is which. He simply pursues his vision of excellence in whatever he does, leaving others to decide whether he is working or playing. To him, he is always doing both. Now, there are some downsides to that. I mean, Marty is the kind of guy, I remember one time, I think I have this story in Over Deliver, but I remember, Marty and I were always the last 2 in the office. So, and the way the office was structured is like I would be leaving, it'd be like 7:30, 8 o'clock. And I'd look down this long hallway, and there was Marty with his desk facing out to the hallway. So I actually had to walk by and always would say, good night, Marty. And he'd go, good night, just like a long good night. It was a long hallway too. And one night I stopped and I went over to his office and I said, Marty, I got to ask you a question, because I know it's on the back of your business card. I know how you live your life. And you're not one of those guys that believes that, on your deathbed, you'll regret that you spent too much time at the office, like because you're at the office now. So my question is, and I don't wish this on you, Marty, but if you drop dead tonight at your desk after I leave, and I hope you don't, will you have regrets? And he said no. So you could say that you could say he was a workaholic. You could say that, but his standard for excellence was at such a level, that's what made him who he was. I'm not saying you have to emulate him in every way. I mean, he had kids and he had a family and he cared about them and he provided for them and all of that. But his work and his play were so intertwined. So the lesson from me that was so special is that you must somehow like just incorporate your work and your play. And if people don't know what you're doing, I think that that's one of the secrets to life. Now you have to, manage it, of course, so that it comes with an instruction manual, or at least a caution sign on it. But it's one of the big lessons. Another big lesson, which opens up my last chapter of Over Deliver, is like the quote from Marty is "Life is long," which is a take on life is short. And the thing about life is long, it's more than just what goes around comes around. It's that you plant your flag everywhere you go in life, and your life is long because it's the only one you have. So you have to, if you look at it that way, whether you live to be 50, 100, 150, it doesn't really matter. You have to always, again, pursue excellence. But it's an interesting thing, and life is long was one of the credos for me that I got from him, that stays with me today. And it opens up because the last chapter of the book, the title of the chapter is Playing the Long Game. And so when you're playing a long game, life is long. And so it enabled me in Marty's image that we're not always going for the quick sale. We look at renewals first, believe it or not. One time I was sitting with him, like looking at the business of Boardroom's newsletters. Bottom Line Personal, we had a newsletter that once got to 1 million subscribers with no advertising. As Paris Lampropoulos, the great copywriter, says, yeah, Boardroom built a $100 million business, $39 at a time, because we didn't have upsells to big pricing, we didn't have masterminds, we didn't have like ascension programs. That was one of my regrets at Boardroom, that we didn't have more ascension programs and higher priced products, but we did okay with $39 product on top of $39 product. I wouldn't recommend that as a business model anymore, but it worked for us. But the interesting thing is that, we really always understood that the renewal, the second order, was more important than the first. A lot of people realize that, and I'm not telling anybody who's listening to this that something they don't know, but the idea when people talk about going after cold traffic, and we used to call it outside lists. It was called outside lists before it was called cold traffic. But you go after cold traffic, and the idea of selling to cold traffic has been this like monumental thing, that if you can sell to cold traffic as a copywriter, for instance, you can sell anywhere. You had Justin Goff on this interview series. Yeah, I mean, he sells an amazing program on selling to cold traffic. But I maintain that selling the first order with the second order in mind, or the renewal in mind, will get a much better first order, so to speak. It's going to get somebody who's going to be with you for the long haul, and that's what playing the long game in a microcosm means to me. So that, playing the long game always, and I do it with my relationships too. I just was reading a manuscript that I'm writing an endorsement for from a great marketer, Joe Polish, who's writing a new book, What's in It for Them. And he talks about, you have to, and I talk about this all the time in my book as well, about when Jay Abraham talks about relationship capital, and that you're developing relationship capital for the long haul. People are not numbers. People are people. They're humans. I always say when you have a big list, lists are people too, but everybody's a person everywhere. And so having respect for that is one of the most amazing things. And I think Marty understood that. I learned it from him, and that's one of the big ones too. Life is long, and playing the long game.
Yeah, in that vein, I think one of the reasons that Jed Canty, my mentor, and I were so successful when we first got to Moneymap Press, the Agora division we worked
Agora,
at,
yeah,
is we came in just as copywriters, but one of the things that really improved, I think, the business and our copy is we worked on the product a lot. So we would come in and say, all right, here's the features we want, and you need to make these good. You need to actually deliver. So now Moneymap has all these great experiences in their products, the live trading, the Money Morning Live. So It's all this stuff. And it is, if your product sucks, you're not going to keep them. You're not going to keep that customer. It's a very short game type. And I've worked in direct response companies in the past that, they had a newsletter, but it was just outsourced from freelancers, and they weren't, really tapping into the expertise that they were kind of trying to get you to sell. So yeah, playing that long game it's very important in every business, because, you don't start unless you're in some weird biz op, you have one product and you're trying to sell. But if you're starting a business, you want it to last for years and years. So think of with the ends in the beginning, and you'll be a lot more successful.
You make a good point about the product itself. I've been in rooms with people who launch products online, and they say, well, we did a $2 million launch, we did a $3 million launch, and we had 40% returns, but it doesn't matter because we can stomach that, and we still made a lot of profit. And that's one way to do it. I mean, I'm not going to tell them not to do it, because that's not my style. Ben Settle or somebody like that would tell them not to do it, or people would scold them. I have to be careful because I'm an elder statesman of sorts. So when I scold, it's like grandpa at the picnic, get off of my lawn. And I don't want to be that person. However, I will say that it is, I think it's more satisfying. It's more, one of the first rules of thumb that I learned as soon as I got into direct response is that it's so much easier to keep a customer than to get a new one. And so you have to get new ones to bring in new blood, of course. And that's why cold traffic is important, and getting new buyers from outside lists that don't know who you are, which speaks a lot to what breakthrough advertising talks about with levels of sophistication and levels of awareness, which I know you want to talk about. But it's fascinating to me that, when you start thinking about what the renewal looks like, and it's more than just pop-ups for upsells and cross-sells. That's important too. So knowing what the second order is, it can be a second order immediately too, with an upsell, a pop-up upsell, that's true. But you must think about, the great marketers are thinking about 2 or 3 products down the road. And a lot of them are thinking ascension too, the $47 product to the $97 to the $1,500. And that from Agora to the $15,000, course, or
it's a diamond lifetime membership to all the products.
Lifetime, yep. Right? Exactly. So, yeah, I always said I got these quotes from 2 different people. From John Carlton, I got a promotion is not a business. So John used to coach these young entrepreneurs who are online, and they're crushing it on ClickBank and on affiliate networks and all this stuff, and they have a killer promotion. But after that promotion dies, they have nothing else behind it. And John would always lecture them as the old guy in the back, the old guy in the back of the teepee with the wisdom. He would say, your promotion is not a business. And then I heard another one that, and you talked about product. A product is not a business. That's, as you said, it could be a one-off. It's the guy the entrepreneur who speaks in front of Shark Tank, and he's got a product. And you know what? The sharks on Shark Tank invest in one-off businesses. They do. But the ones that have the long-term view, they always get an offer from a shark, because they see that the entrepreneur is thinking ahead. But if it's a hot product in a hot market, they still might get a shark to invest. But but a product is not really a business. And so a lot of them are out. The sharks go out when they realize you don't have a business, you have a product. They speak out of both sides of their mouth, because if the product is if it's unique and it's got distinguishing characteristics, and can be a category of one of sorts, they'll invest in a product, and then a product can become a business. But a product by itself is not a business, and a promotion is not a business.
I know I've worked with Damon John a little bit. We've had him in a couple of promotions. And so just talking to him, when he invests in those, the exit plan that he's looking for is that it's not just we're going to get this in Walmart. It's that, Kraft is going to come buy this product. So he's looking at, they don't have a business, but it can be integrated into a business. So exactly, that is the longer term vision.
It is. That's right. That's right. So I wasn't putting anything down here as far as,
I understand.
But if you think about a product not being a business, but a product can be something to be flipped to a bigger company. And in fact, a lot of the sharks talk about, I'll get you a deal with so-and-so. I'll get you a deal in big box. And then once you're in big box retail, then it can, we were in the infomercial business at Boardroom with books. And there were guys who were selling books, and we didn't do it this way. We were looking at the long game, because once we had a book selling on an infomercial, we turned that infomercial creative into direct mail and online promotion to kind of use multimedia to sell the same book and feed off the infomercial to sell more of that book in multiple media. However, there were people who were selling books. They would just blow it out, and they do it with products and infomercials too. Just blow it out, then go to retail, and with books, they would just get into Barnes and Noble and Amazon at 80% discounting. They make a little profit, but they sell millions of books at the end, and then it just phases out. And then they find another book or another product to blow that out. It's one way to go. That is a business, product to product. But it's just not, it's not what we did at Boardroom. It's not what, the long-term marketers do, but it is a legitimate way to run your life. I just don't think it's going to create a business. You could create, it's a series of one-hit wonders that become multiple hits versus a business that stands the test of time.
Right.
Both can work.
It's a stressful way to run your business. It's because you're always having to find the next thing, and there's no, renewals make a business so much less stressful that you just have something to rely on. Subscriptions, renewals, that kind of stuff is so clutch.
Memberships.
So I do want to get to breakthrough advertising because, you were talking about, you can see I have it all marked up. It's all highlighted. I've been abusing this thing.
I have mine's all marked up too.
You were talking about the making work fun, like if you can't tell the difference. And this book is actually what made copywriting fun for me, because I got it pretty early on. I think I paid a couple $100 for some copy somewhere. But in the beginning, I was trying to just imitate my way to success with copy. I was trying to be John Carlton or David Deutsch or Paris or Gary Bensavinga, and just, here's what they did. I should just try to imitate this. And what breakthrough advertising made me realize is that you're playing a psychological game. So it's a psychological puzzle to solve. And that was the part that made copywriting fun for me. Now,
that's a great way to look at it. I always say that, when I think in the introduction that the afterword that I wrote to the edition that I publish now, I think I wrote something like, it's known as a book on copywriting and direct marketing and all that, but it's about human behavior. It really is. It's like RFM, recency, frequency, monetary. You could say is a direct marketing rule of thumb, but it's actually a mechanism of how people behave in the marketplace. And I think, and behave in general. Gene has stuff about, people's reptilian monkey brain, he calls it, and how people react and how people behave. I know I wrote in the afterward, like, human behavior hasn't changed since that book, Breakthrough Advertising, was written in 1966. Not one word was changed, and the book is 100% relevant. The ads are a little dated, but they're all relevant. And I said, human behavior hasn't changed since 1066. It's human beings. And that's the underlying thing. Everybody had the same human wants and desires are still within humans today. What's available to us is amazing, with technology, and, there's just so much more available, but it's the basic tenets of human behavior are all still the same. And that's what breakthrough advertising got to. And I like the way you said that, that it made it fun and not a job to look at copywriting that way.
Yeah, it was still work, but it was pleasurable work because you're solving puzzles and problems. Right. I know we could do a whole college course on breakthrough advertising. And actually you have I just learned this, you do 3-week boot camps that really push people through it. So maybe we'll get people on the wait list for that after we're done talking here. But I want to talk about the 3, I think, most impactful concepts that I got out of it. Now there's a lot of how-to and, the identification stuff and all that towards the end. But the 3 first chapters essentially are about mass desire, then the state of awareness, and the stage of sophistication. I hope I'm saying those right. So let's
levels or state. I forget which is which. One's levels, one's stages.
Yeah, one's levels. There's actually a quote from the mass desire thing that I thought really stood out, because what is mass desire is always a strange question. But Gene Schwartz defines it as we can define this mass desire quite simply. It is the public spread of a private one. So how do you kind of interpret that? How would you talk about the mass desire for people?
Yeah, I mean, I'll quote Gene again. He also says after that numerous times where, the copywriter doesn't create desire. The desire is already out there. It's how the copywriter can find it. And you have to go multiple levels beneath what you see in the world. You have to first observe. I mean, the desire is in the marketplace already. And so how do you bring it out in how you express, how you create copy or sell or write? And so I think that mass desire for me is not like this magic bullet. Like go back to Shark Tank. So the guy goes on to Shark Tank, the entrepreneur, and he says, I've got this widget and I know it's an $87 billion business. And a lot of times Mark Cuban's there and he goes, I'm out. Just the fact that it's like this big business and you want to get a little piece of it. Again, one way to do it. But how about instead of just identifying something that you think is a multi-billion-dollar universe or business, why not look closely at different areas where there's evidence of what people are buying, what they're doing, what they're reading. I mean, Gene was a purveyor of culture. When Gene died, the obituary for him was Gene Schwartz, art collector, dies. It wasn't a big headline, but it was a headline. It wasn't like a little small obituary. And he was a major art collector. Now, there's one paragraph in his obituary about his direct marketing, which is amazing considering what a legendary copywriter and marketer he was. And so, and the way I interpret that in terms of mass desire is that he understood that you must have, his favorite magazine to read was the National Enquirer, because that's the way he was looking at what he says. If you lose touch with what the country's thinking, you lose touch with your audience, you're finished, basically. So he was always looking at where the audiences were, what they were thinking, and then that's where, and then you can find the desire within that by identifying the levels of awareness and levels of sophistication within each of those universes of people. But that's when you do the deep digging. But you need to understand, what are people talking about? What are they interested in? Dan Kennedy took this to another level when he said you need to do marketing by walking around. You walk around, literally, you can walk around in Walmart and observe people and see what the people are doing. What are they thinking? John Carlton talks about this in terms of being mindful of everything around you. There's no such thing as writer's block because there's ideas all around us. You have to pay attention to what's going on around you. I mean, I beat myself up when I say, whenever I think that I know what I'm going to write about each week for my blog. And all I have to do is just be mindful of what's around me. And I'll always come up with something. And so, so mass desire it's kind of like, it kind of means that it's mass market, or it's you can come up with a product that's going to sell billions of dollars immediately. You don't just go there. You have to slice and it talks about specialization versus commodities and all of that. That's important as well. And that's why when you're selling, people who come in with a product to Shark Tank, that's clearly a commodity, that's going to be a lot less desirable than something that's going to be a specialty product. And you can create specialty out of commodity, And that's what makes it something more special. And then you have to go into the market and see what people can you find, the different strata of people that know that commodity, are less aware of that commodity, who are sophisticated in that commodity. And then you can come up with different levels. And then you might only want to go after one level of, like, a very sophisticated person who is dealing with a commodity on a different level. That's multiple. That's like playing, three-dimensional chess with copy and product. That's the way I see mass desire. I mean, it was a long-winded answer that didn't really go anywhere, but that's how I see it anyway.
Yeah, the way I see it is there's a bunch of basic desires that all human beings have. Like we want to have status, we want to be comfortable, we want to be healthy, we want to be safe. And then the culture around you kind of shapes how an individual thinks about that. And so that's why you could have these mass desires, is because, there's evolutionary needs that we all have. And then culture kind of comes in and changes the individual way of thinking about it. And actually, copywriters are a kind of a part of culture. Actually, I don't know if you know this story. Do you know where the Make America Great Again Trump slogan actually came from?
No.
So Jed Canty, who's a super liberal guy, which is,
I know he's a liberal who writes for conservative media.
But this was back in his Newsmax days. He was doing an event at Mar-a-Lago with Sarah Palin, and the headline and the big sign behind her when they were recording was "Make America Great Again." And Trump walks in and goes, "It's a good slogan." And then
crazy.
12 years later, he's running for president on it.
Yeah, but I mean, if Jed could have gotten like a couple of royalties on the hats and the shirts and all of that, at least, that would have been pretty cool.
He would have donated all the proceeds to Democrats just to make up for his sins. But
I always found that's the sign of an amazing copywriter too, that they could write about, because you're not gonna. That's the other thing. You can't write about something like if you're a newbie copywriter, and you know this because you coach copywriters and you've been coached by the best. So you know this for a fact that you can't start being, we'll say if you're a liberal writing for conservative or vice versa, as a starting point. You've got to do so much research in anything. In the health field, like you can't say I'm going to be a health copywriter. Give me what you got. I think that's going to make you a mediocre copywriter to start, as opposed to honing in. And again, it's all about specialization there too. It's all about it's all about niche. I mean, every hot seat I've ever done as a participant and as a coach. I've done hot seats in my masterminds. I've done hot seats in masterminds where I'm a member, where I'm on a hot seat. Every single one, usually the click on the dial, as Gary Halbert would say. Like somebody's talking about what they're doing and how the struggles they're having. And you click, and you get to that point and says, and the click on a dial means your dial is what each person knows. And you click till you get something that you can share with somebody that will give them insight into their problem. That's what hot seats are all about. And the click on my dial on most dials for most people is the niche dial. Like go deep, go a mile deep before you go a mile wide. It's such an obvious thing, and it comes up every single hot seat almost. There's some element of that because someone is thinking too wide, too broad, and they're not going to narrow it down first. You can always go wide later. There's more than enough time. Life is long. You can always go wide later, but going wide initially is for most, especially copywriters, will be a kiss of death. I mean, specialize before you do anything else. It would be my suggestion how do you get there? You ask questions like Gene Schwartz did of Marty. You have a hunger, you have curiosity, you have, you have to have some knowledge of direct marketing, but you need to have passion for what you're writing about. Now, I'll tell you, the fact that Jed, using him as an example, had passion for writing about the opposite thing he believed in tells me the research. I mean, he put in his hours as a copywriter to get there. I mean, that doesn't just happen overnight.
No, and to be fair, I don't think Jed actually writes about the opposite thing that he believes in. That Sarah Palin thing might have been an exemption to that, but for the most part, he knows just not how to trip up the audience's beliefs. So he knows all the areas he disagrees with, but he's a huge angel investor, and so he writes very passionately about angel investing, and they built a big division over at Moneymap based on that.
Right.
So he just knows the psychological triggers to avoid, and he doesn't have to lie or go against his beliefs or any of that.
No. Yeah, I mean, passion goes a lot of ways. I mean, passion is you're passionate to create something. And if you're going to create something inside a passion, it could be a passion that I know what not to tell you. In Jed's case, that all of that is passion. All of that is part of curiosity, though. He had to study all those psychological triggers, in depth to know which ones to use and which ones not to use.
Yeah, I have so one of my most successful promos ever was written to menopausal women who want to lose weight. Okay. So I don't know, I obviously wasn't that passionate about weight loss for menopausal women, but it was fascinating to get into it. So once you start diving into the details and talking to these women, who, by the way, will tell you the most horrific stories you'll ever want to hear. And then I brought on Marty Eddy to work on that promo with me, because there was all these things. There was one area where I almost, you can never go back in time and tell if it would have screwed it up or not. But I had this research. The research shows that all women, when you ask them what their ideal body shape is, they choose this hourglass. So I kept saying, oh, your ideal hourglass figure. And she's like, when you say that, I pictured Jessica Rabbit, and I don't want to look like Jessica Rabbit. So, it was able to pull something out that was triggering at least one person. And we just put in a more vague, but in ways more specific, your ideal body type. That really, so they could picture themselves.
I remember that promotion. That was an awesome. I've seen that promotion. That was very. That was genius.
It's still running. We launched it in 2017. I'm still getting nice royalty checks every month from it.
And the variations, I just thought of another one, like Ryan Levesque with his quiz funnels. He has the 4 different types, and and you bucket them and all of that. People want to have they want to have a label. If you can fit into something and then have a solution for that, that's what life's all about.
Yeah, well, that actually goes to the kind of, if in the state of awareness and the stages of sophistication, in level 5, it's kind of the same solution for both, right? All right, so I guess I should quickly go. The states of awareness are the most aware, which is basically where the person knows what they want and they know your product. So it's the easiest sale to make, basically.
Right.
The second stage, they know the product, but they don't want it yet. The third stage is they want the outcome that the product produces, but they don't know that there's a product yet. Fourth stage is they have a need, but they don't know that there's a product that can satisfy it. And the fifth is they're not even aware of their need or desire. And that's
cold
where
traffic. That's cold traffic.
Exactly. And that's where it's the hardest marketing trick to pull off, is getting people to identify, to self-select into a group that uses this product. But
also don't underestimate that all the other stages requires a different copy approach. So, that's what I said when we started this podcast. I said copy to list, messaging to list. But a list is not this mass list. It's list segmentation, and they can self-select. The segmentation doesn't have to be you doing it, the marketer. You can have them. Well, you have to ask them questions. That's why the idea of surveying and quizzes are so powerful, is that they can self-select into these different. They self-select into the levels that they are at, and then you gear copy to those levels. And I'll tell you, in direct mail, it was so much tougher because you had to pay for different zip code strings. It was expensive with postage and printing. No excuses in email. No excuses in social media.
I'm curious, actually, how did those lists come together back in how did they even assemble them? I started in 2008. It was, there were still people doing a lot of offline. Obviously, it was really big then, but it was all online sales, like the long scrolling. This was before video, but
right.
So I came into the industry and I've heard about it, and I actually read Dick Benson's book, so I know a little bit about this. But can you kind of talk about how those lists came together? Because it's fascinating.
Well, the thing that you couldn't over select, especially we did big mailings at Boardroom. I mean, we had mailings that were 1 million pieces. We had one mailing that was 9 million pieces. There's not a lot. I mean, the segmentation started with just buyers versus previous buyers versus ex buyers. But I'll tell you, it always came down to RFM. always came out to RFM, recency, frequency, monetary value, which is a concept. I'm going to be doing a webinar with Perry Marshall and Troy Broussard on RFM, because in our audiences, I mean, I talk about it a lot. In fact, it's one of the chapters of my book. It's RFM and lists, but it's RFM. And RFM, anybody who doesn't know what it is, you're probably using it and you don't even realize it. But and again, it's not a rule of thumb. It's not necessarily a technique. It's how people behave in the marketplace. So that's how the lists came together in direct mail. Now, so for instance, we did it on a wide scale. So we had mailings of 1 million names, and we were able to basically do, I don't want to get into the idea of regression analysis, regression modeling, which is how we did it, but it was all based on RFM. So the idea was that we had data on this big universe of names that we owned. So these are names these are house names. And so we know what they bought, we know when they bought, and we know how much money they spent. So recency is how recently they bought, frequency is how frequently they bought, and monetary is how much they've spent in total.
Yeah, and just so, for people, it's kind of counterintuitive when you hear it, but the more recently somebody bought something, the more likely they are to buy again. The more recently.
That was the first thing it's funny, the counterintuitive piece of that. I learned that my first week at Boardroom, where I said, that doesn't make sense, because if someone just bought, they have no money to spend on something else. Yeah, little did I know. So yeah, recency with frequency is the best. So someone who already bought from you 6 months ago is powerful. That's a multi-buyer. It's someone who has recency bias. So that's always the best. And then if you can add, monetary value is actually not always the key component. When we're selling, remember I said we sold, $1 billion worth of business over my history at Boardroom, $39 at a time. It was actually the interest area that was often more important than how much they actually spent. For instance, if you're selling I don't know, a tool for architects, a T-square, a kick-ass T-square for architects, and you want to go to Architects Magazine, how much they spend for that subscription to Architects Magazine has little to do with how they'll respond. There's no multi-buyer there. It's the interest area that's going to trigger the purchase. It's a silly example, but you get the idea that the actual purchase price of the magazine is irrelevant. But how recently they subscribed and how many times they renewed would determine much more. And that is a little bit of monetary, because if they renewed twice, then that would tell you something. But if it was a controlled circulation, there was no money involved. So monetary is not always as much of an indicator.
Yeah, I think of it as like, I'll buy 15 books on business on Amazon for $10 each, but then I'll also buy a $10,000 mastermind. Exactly. That subject is what I care about. So It's just a different level to get there.
But anyway, so that's where we did the segmentation. So what you would do is you would have this big universe. Let's say our house universe was 9 million names of people that previous buyers, current buyers, and we narrowed that down to like 3 million buyers over the last 24 months. And we would send out like a cross section of the 3 million, which we knew would lose money. So we would send out 50,000 or 100,000 names, send out and get responses. Now the response rate wouldn't be that high because we hadn't segmented anything, but because we had data on every single person on the list of recency, frequency, how much they spent, what products they bought, when they bought them, and how frequently, the names would come back. And those the people who bought off this like general promotion, which we lost money on, we called that the nth that we would send out, that determined how we would go back to the rest of the universe and segment. So for instance, and this is done now, I mean, a Facebook lookalike model is using some of the same principles of mailed regression modeling, not as sophisticated, and you're not really spending money to learn the data. But so we would then go out and we would actually be able to, across the 2 million, we would be able to segment based on what names are in the universe that we are going to go mail, of the names that came in on the nth, where the best names are based on RFM. And we would actually rank the names in the 2 million by either 10% deciles or 5% demi-deciles, and what response rate we could expect, because you could actually predict that. I didn't do that. We had a PhD in statistics that did that, but we were able to do that, and we have a cutoff point. Like we have a cutoff point that this is where they're going to diminishing returns. So we'd mail everything above the line, and then we would test around the line to see how deep we could go. And then below the line, we would take like a small nth just to make sure that the data was accurate. And it was a very scientific way to segment your house list. Now with outside lists, it was a lot more difficult. So you could do models on outside lists. And the more sophisticated the modeling techniques got, you would go to a list owner or an owner of a database of some sort, and they would do a model for you based on your customers versus the customers. That's where the lookalike model came out. And they were better than going out to a cold audience. Not a lot better, but better. And then, of course, if you can do a regression model like we did on our house file, we knew exactly where all the bodies were buried or the bodies were alive that would respond, and the ones that we would just not mail. And so that's a short version of how we did it. There's a lot more to it, but I think you get the idea that it was not just done by throwing, a dart, at the wall and saying, we'll mail these names now, because you had to. You're paying postage and printing. You're paying, $500 to $800 in the mail for 24-page magalogs and 64-page bookalogs, and you're not going to waste money. I mean, you think about how much money would be wasted if email marketers had to spend something on postage. And there was an urban legend at some point, I don't know when it was, but I remember it was like, oh, the post office is going to start charging for emails, postage for emails. And it was freaking out all these email marketers. And frankly, I was like thinking sort of like that would be really good, because that would weed out all the charlatans and all the people that are sloppy marketers. And that's why paying postage made me a better marketer, because I could do an email a much better job of targeting, because people think that if you send an email out and you get no response, that it's okay. Well, it's not okay, because if you send direct mail out with no response, you lost a shitload of money but you're not going to lose a shitload of money on an email. But you are losing, going back to the long game, you don't know how many people you turned off because there were no responses. So therefore, they're not reading what you're sending. They're not engaged in what you're sending. And it's going to affect the next email you send out for sure. But a lot of email marketers don't track that. They don't track an email that is negatively affecting the next email. Whereas we looked at every direct mail piece and say, did this affect the list in a negative way? And we knew the response rates like the back of our hand.
Yeah, I mean, there are some sophisticated email marketers who really do track click through and unsubscribes and that. But they're, most people that are getting into this, I think copywriters especially, don't understand the importance of the list and the targeting and how much money a client, even online. Like when I worked with Sherpa, they did take their promos to a very broad Facebook audience and then figure out which segments that they could sell to with different ads further down. And so you're losing $10,000, $20,000 just to get the information for where to advertise, essentially.
Exactly. One size fits all email is not the way to go. One size fits all email to determine how you can create different sizes for different segments is okay. But constantly sending out one size fits all email to your entire list, your entire audience. Even just, your best list is your expires in the case of subscriptions. So why would I not want to have a different message? We had a mailing once for one of our newsletters that it was to an expire list. And all we did on the promotion, we took the control promotion and we wrote, "We want you back." That lifted response by 30%. Imagine if you actually work at it, what you could do. An expire is, because people expire for different reasons. If you have good products, if you have crappy products, they expire because your product sucks. That's who I'm talking about. Most people expire because it was too expensive or they don't have time. It's time and money. So if you can convince them that they're missing out, a little bit of FOMO, and we miss you because you're not with us as part of our family, and you can write copy that can engage with them on that level, your expire list will churn so much more response than your actives list or your other buyers lists.
Yeah, I think about crafting. So actually, this speaks to stage of sophistication, right? Because that is an ex buyer is just a more sophisticated buyer
It
than.
is.
So
They know your product, believe me.
Yeah, the stages of sophistication are that it's your first to market, which means you just basically tell people what you have, and they either want it or they don't. The second one is the second product to market, which you basically the advertising strategy that Gene Schwartz lays out there is amplify the claims essentially. So
Right.
it's his example I think is like whiter than white bleach, and then it gets whiter than whiter than whiter than whiter, and that gets you to when the audience has been inundated with that gets you to the third stage. And this is where I think a lot of financial copy and health copy uses. It's because they've seen all that hyped up marketing. So you add a mechanism, some cool way that the product works. The stage forward then is just amplifying the mechanism, making it bigger, faster, quicker, easier. And then again, that stage 5 is when they've seen it all, they've seen all the mechanisms, is you get into identity, which is, I always think about this. That's where our politics are at right now, is that the only thing they can sell on is you're a this type of person or you're a this type of person, because we've seen all the BS for all the years. They've gone through all the different strategies and plans they have, and now the only thing left is trying to sell you an identity.
Exactly. There's a chart in Great Leads by Michael Masterson, Mark Ford, and John Ford that basically graphs out the 5 stages and what the key thing is. I use that when I speak about that. We also use in the Breakthrough Advertising Bootcamp, we go through exercises, things like to try to get to it, you have to just ask a lot of questions, which we talked about already. But and we have these exercises that are so good. It's like they say that you ask them a question, it's like, you want this product because, and they say what it is, and they say, so you can, and then they give you another answer. So you can give us another answer. So you can give us another answer. And that's how you can get to the depths of what the mindset is, like what's going on in their head that you can't get to with superficial questions. There's another way of doing it, which is, what they will tell you, what they won't tell you, and what they can tell you. And we have a worksheet for that in the Breakthrough Advertising Bootcamp that really gets to the nut, because what they can tell you, they can't tell you. So how can you get to that? But if you get to the thing that they can't tell you, you've got the gold. But you have to get there by finding out what they will tell you and what they won't tell you. Those you can get to. The example that my friend Michael Fishman uses all the time is what they will tell you is like, my house, my basement's flooded and I have water in my basement. What they won't tell you is that my house smells and it's like, and there's mold, but I'm embarrassed. And what they can't tell you could be all kinds of other things about, like, I'm a failure in life because the place where I live and I take care of my family, and this is one example, I take care of my family, is a cesspool. I made that up, but but if you can get to that, you can write to copy that. If you're selling the most amazing water pump, you need to get to those and you've done this in your copywriting. You really want to get to those levels. I mean, you can get to this. The superficial level can help, especially if you're selling a specialty product, so it's not commoditizing it. But if you can get to what's really going on for them, so we have these exercises that feed off levels of sophistication and levels of awareness. So the boot camp has been really successful for some product owners and copywriters to get really into the book at a different level. Because you know what? Breakthrough Advertising is one of the densest reads of all time. Like, you have to read it so slowly. In fact, when I sell the book, I have a note on top of it that says, read the first 3. This is what Paris Propolis does for his copy cubs. You read the first 3 chapters multiple times before you go on to the rest of the book. You've got to really understand those concepts. And we just came up with another, and we did the boot camp to help people work through it a little bit. And then there's a book that we're going to publish. It's called Breakthrough Advertising Mastery, which is going to be a companion book that the first half is like a lot of the exercises that we did in the boot camp and a lot more, kind of going deep on the first 3 chapters and more in Breakthrough Advertising. The second half of Breakthrough Advertising Mastery, the companion book, has 150 ads, actual ads, that Gene refers to in breakthrough advertising. A lot of the ads, there are some ads in breakthrough advertising that Gene republished, but he talks about ads. We had a guy, this Brazilian copywriter who's a student of breakthrough advertising, just gifted me all the ads that Gene, he went and found every single one. I mean, and he wanted to participate in the publishing. Didn't ask for money. I mean, I gave him a free membership in Titans Accelerator. Wonderful, young, ambitious copywriter. So the second half of the Breakthrough Advertising Mastery companion book are all those ads in 4-color that Gene refers to with a cross-reference to where they appear in the book. So you can see everything in action. Now it's in action in 1966, which adds a really interesting perspective on these ads for products that no longer exist, that are, these miracle products, but it's all relevant because what you can have something in today's advertising marketplace that you would relate to what was taking place then. So I thought there's a little nostalgia, by doing it this way, but I think it's going to be incredibly valuable and useful. And that book should be published in the fall sometime, and it's going to be wonderful.
Yeah, I'll definitely pick that up once it's out. But one of the things that I think makes this book so timeless is that, these 5 stages on both, they're cycles, which is why it's just changing markets, but it's the same psychology. And so that's why, he really broke it down to the very core of what advertising is and how people make decisions about buying things.
And he had examples. And that's why it's funny. People would say to me when they read the book, I wish he had more examples, or I wish that my readers talk about getting ideas, going back to Marty being interviewed by Gene Schwartz and then writing the copy. Breakthrough Advertising Mastery, the companion book, not my idea. It was the readers of the book letting me know that, boy, that would be so valuable if I could see all the ads and see how they were constructed, and to see why Gene saw the 5 levels of sophistication and awareness in those ads. I mean, seeing it on the playing field is so valuable. That's why swipe files are so valuable. And people who can bring, when Paris teaches, Paris did a presentation for Titans Accelerator that he walked us through the life cycle. You said cycle. I was going to say lifestyle, but it is a cycle. And he walked us through a particular segment. He did one in finance. He did one in nutritional supplements. And he walked us through with ads showing us how it went from, most aware to least aware, and or least aware to most aware, and how he showed that. And I'll tell you, that's when it starts sinking in. That's when a copywriter, marketer, anybody who's studying this stuff, it's going to start sinking in when you start the repetition with the seeing is believing, so to speak.
All right. Well, we are just over an hour on this, so we got to wrap up. But you had offered to anybody that doesn't have Breakthrough Advertising yet, we're going to do a special link. It's henryb.co/BA, as in Breakthrough Advertising. And if you're in the US, I think you're going to do free shipping and a little bit of a discount.
Free shipping in the US, priority mail shipping. The book is not cheap, but it's a lot cheaper than where you'll get it on eBay and Amazon.
Yeah, this book was selling, it was a hidden gem that everybody had heard about, but it went out of print until Boardroom picked it back up a few years ago.
And so I picked it up at Titans also.
Yeah, so it was selling for hundreds, or I think there was $1,000 copies out there.
There were copies on Amazon and eBay for over 1,000, and there's still copies on eBay and Amazon for $300, $500. So I sell it for $125. It's worth every penny. I'll do free shipping, priority shipping for anybody who uses the link that we give them from this podcast.
That's henryb.co/BA. And that'll take you right to the special.
For international, I'll give them half price shipping on expedited shipping, which is that $60 shipping. I'll charge $30 for international expedited shipping as a discount as well, just for being in your listeners to this podcast. I don't usually discount the book, but I for your group, I'd like to do that.
If you're in business that has any connection to direct response, it's the Bible for direct response, essentially. Any copywriter.
Paris always says that he doesn't recommend it first because he considers it a very advanced text. So it's not the first book to read, you know, something like Triggers or Scientific Advertising or Schwab's How to Write an Advertiser. There are books that I would probably start with first, but you must have this book. It must be on your shelf. It must be on the reference. Gene's other book, which I also sell, The Brilliance Breakthrough, is nothing like Breakthrough Advertising. It was a book that he wrote because he wanted to prove that grammar is overrated, and that he wanted to prove that, you know, there was a way of writing that where every word matters. And so that book is more, not for beginners, but it's about how to write anything. I think the subtitle of Brilliance Breakthrough is how to talk and write so that no one ever forgets, so you'll never be forgotten. And so I don't think it's that book was even more lost than Breakthrough Advertising. There was one copy when I republished it, there was one copy available on Amazon for $2,000, and it was signed by Gene. And so I had to go to Barbara Schwartz, who's Gene's wife. When I got the rights to Breakthrough Advertising, I wanted the rights to Brilliance Breakthrough, and she only had one copy herself. And she gave it to me, but I had to make a photocopy of the book and then give her original copy back. And I used that photocopy to create the book. That's how rare this book was.
Wow.
And so now I publish it. That book is $195. It comes with a workbook. And that's a wonderful book as well.
So where can people go to find more about you? Where the links go by Over Deliver?
Yeah, that's probably the best place, actually, because they'll become members of my online family if they go to overdeliverbook.com. And on that site, you have to buy Over Deliver book. It's $27 book. But what you get on that site at overdeliverbook.com are amazing bonuses. Some of the stuff we've talked about today. You mentioned Dick Benson's book. There's a PDF of Dick Benson's book on that site that you can print and own. The book's out of print. Gordon Grossman's book on direct mail, full PDF that you can print and own. There's a swipe file going back to the early 1900s, 400 pages of swipes. There's a swipe file from Dan Kennedy. All my mentors are on there. Jay Abraham. There's 19 keynote speeches that Jay Abraham did that you have access to at overdeliverbook.com. Plus, you get on my list in my online family, so you get my blog every Sunday, and it's a good place to be and hang out. And so overdeliverbook.com. If you don't want to spend $27 on my book for free, you can go to briankurtz.net. You can opt in, get on my list, become a member of my online family. A lot of free content at briankurtz.net. There's an archive of all of my blog posts going back to 2014. So that's the best place to just go find out about me, briankurtz.net. But if you want to get into me a little bit more, overdeliverbook.com would be a great place, because you'll get bonuses from all my mentors: Jay Abraham, Perry Marshall, Dan Kennedy, Gordon Grossman, Dick Benson. It's a great site.
I will include all those links in the descriptions here. And as always, you over-delivered on this. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for great questions, and I'm glad you asked me to do this, Henry.